You're going to need to plan ahead when it comes to cooking. Here's where we take off the training wheels a bit. Cooking is one of the most complex mechanics in Pokemon Sleep. That's just not true. If your goal is to progress far in the game, live every week like it's growth week. It's a way of life. Happy screen time, and thank you for subscribing for Pokemon Sleep Tomfoolery. I've got a little something special cooking up for you today. It's a strategy guide for the early and mid game cooking in Pokemon Sleep. And hopefully, if you clicked on this video, you already knew that that's what I was going to say. If you didn't know that, you might want to go get checked for short-term memory loss. And what strategy guide would be complete without disclaimers at the beginning? The first disclaimer is about spoilers. If you are a spoiler-free game player, and mad respect, I don't have time for that, I would suggest that in the case of Pokemon Sleep, you make an exception. If your goal is to progress far in the game and to get high Snorlax strength, you're going to need to plan ahead when it comes to cooking. You're going to want to have some sense of how much of each ingredient do I need to make the meals that I want to make, and what Pokemon do I need to hunt to make those meals. Without that, you might as well just ignore cooking in Pokemon Sleep entirely. If you're less worried about the strength, why do you keep watching when I put out strategy guides?
You really like me, I guess.
Alright, so I'm going to recommend that you be willing to see what recipes are coming in this game, and you're going to see some of them in this video. All of them that are in the game so far, in fact. So, spoiler warning, but before you leave, how far have you gotten in Minecraft with that attitude? I know, it's not an attitude, it's a way of life. The next disclaimer is that cooking is one of the most complex mechanics in Pokemon Sleep. It's not for everybody, and the goal of this video is not to give you a step-by-step guide for how to cook successfully every Pokemon that you're going to need to catch, etc., etc. The goal is to give you a basic overview of what you should target in the early game to have the most success with cooking, and then to teach you some principles so that you can go out and take some steps on your own. A lot of what you target in cooking through the mid game and even into the late game very much depends on how good of ingredient Pokemon you catch, which, as we know in Pokemon Sleep, is out of our control. So like, if you never catch a great Pokemon for a certain ingredient, it doesn't matter how essential I tell you that ingredient is, which is why I'm not going to tell you that. Is this a disclaimer video? Let's get started. In order to put the early game of cooking into context, we're actually going to look a little bit at the late game of cooking, but not to do a deep dive into that, only to show you one thing. Here's a chart that I use to reference, and shout out to Wookie Force for creating these mobile meal guides. I took the ones that they made and I stitched them together, but they are a lifesaver on my phone, so thank you. Here's what I want to call your attention to. You see all the black lines of things crossed out? Those are all of the recipes that I plan on never making again. Now that I'm at a point where I'm making some of the best recipes in the game relatively consistently, I don't need to make some of the worst recipes in the game at all. But when you're getting started, they are the best recipes that you can make. That said, unless they rebalance an ingredient like they did with soybeans back when Quaquaval was added to the game and rebalance the dish strengths that go with that ingredient, or maybe if I'm forced to make a lower level dish in challenge mode, that bit's not gonna get old. Okay, the point is, there will come a point in your cooking strategies where you will be targeting the top 3 to 5 dishes in a certain meal type every time. So don't stress too much about cooking in the early game for that reason, because at some point, all of the work you're doing to grind up the dish levels is going to become irrelevant. I actually think that works out though, because it just means the early dishes allow us to learn how to get into cooking, but you actually can't really like mess anything up long term, so don't be afraid to get into this world. So with this in mind, let's actually look at the early game recipes. When you first unlock the pot in Pokemon Sleep, it can hold 15 ingredients. There are 15 recipes that take 15 ingredients or less, but most likely you'll start out by targeting the single ingredient recipes, even though eventually your level bonus for these dishes won't matter at all. The best thing that you can do with these early game dishes is pick 1 or 2 and always make that 1 or 2. Eventually, sure, spend a week unlocking all of the other dishes, get those diamonds. A girl needs a best friend after all. But just like a single level 25 Pokemon is better than 5 level 5 Pokemon, spreading your resources thin on the dishes actually does you kind of a disservice. Here's the other thing I'd call your attention to. First, you're going to see that apples is a single meal dish across every meal type, but an apple ingredient specialist like Fuecoco is actually probably going to be a little harder to find right away. You may not even see one before you've unlocked cooking in the game. Take a look at curry, where we see milk, honey, and bean sausage as single ingredient meals. Then if we look over at salad, we see bean sausage again, and then if we look over at desserts, we see honey and milk again. So with that in mind, probably don't target the single tomato recipe as your one and only one, unless you find like a really great bell sprout or whatever. My recommendation here is going to be to specifically target bean sausage and milk, and we'll get into why literally in like 30 seconds. But first, I just want to say that if you do this, regardless of what type of meal you get for the week, you will always have something to fall back on from that lowest tier, because making a meal is better than not making a meal if your goal is strength, and making an actual dish is better than just throwing in the random ingredients and making a mixed dish, because you get more strength. So this means in the very early game, we want to try to get a Charmander and a Squirtle. Starter Pokemon, right? Now, you don't have to worry about finding a Charmander and a Squirtle that are going to take you all the way to level 50. Our goal is only going to be to get them to, I'm not going to look it up, but I think level 14 is when they can each evolve in this game. And I don't care if you take them past level 14 ever, as far as this guide is concerned. So long as they either have Ingredient Finder M in their level 10 slot, or they have an Ingredient Up Nature. If you can get a Charmander and a Squirtle like that and evolve these, you should be able to make any of these dishes 3 meals a day. Okay, not any of these, specifically the bean sausage and milk meals. But let's take a look at level 2 to see why that's extra special. Check it out, level 2. Our pot can now hold 18 ingredients. And now for both curry and salad, we have dishes that use milk and bean sausages. You see where I'm going with this? In the early game, those are going to be pretty strong, and they're going to be stronger than those single ingredient meals. Now, this strategy doesn't help you with desserts, but you can still fall back on that single ingredient milk dish. Or if the game has blessed you with other ingredients, or other ingredients that come from your skill Pokemon and berry Pokemon, maybe you'll be able to make some of these meals. Which brings us to the core principle, and no, I'm not going to let you wander off by yourself just yet, but this is where, as much as I can say, hey, this is a really solid start, Squirtle and Charmander. Obviously, it doesn't give you full coverage, but you don't really want full coverage in the early game. You want full coverage in the late cooking game. But what you might want to try to target from a dessert standpoint really depends on what other Pokemon happen to come your way. Now, level 14 is, in the early game, probably feels like a huge investment, a huge effort to get that far. But you're going to leave those Pokemon behind unless they meet the following criteria. For Squirtle, if it has milk at level 30, you're going to want to find a different Squirtle. And yes, I do think you should stick with a Squirtle, meaning a Wartortle, or you're going to actually take this one to be a Blastoise. But you're going to want a Squirtle that's good at finding ingredients and that has cacao at level 30, so that when you bring your pot up to level 4, you can make that salad that has cacao and bean sausage. For curry, you can keep grinding up that bean sausage and milk dish. And for desserts, hopefully the game has blessed you with either soybeans, apples, or honey providers that you can pair with that cacao finder. Now, you might be thinking, this is very specific, to which I say, yes, but there's a method to this madness. You see, if you can get to that point, you can allow those dishes to carry you through the end game of cooking, through the late game. There's no end game in this game, except the mini games, which are ingredient mini games. Wow. If you can get that situation in place, you should be good for a while. And you can look at the other dishes, you can see what other things your other Pokemon you're commonly using provide you, and you can figure out what else you might want to be hunting. Oh, and let me call this out before I forget. That level 2 to level 3 upgrade doesn't change what dishes you can make, so the level 4 upgrade is what you'd be looking for. Might not be worth upgrading until you can do both at once. That's the point. Okay, so let's look at some of the other early game Pokemon. And you're not catching these Pokemon to give you ingredients, but Pokemon do give you ingredients. So for example, if you're hunting an Igglybuff to have a healer, well, it's going to give you honey. Okay, let's look at a different one. In the early game, you're going to want to get a Totodile for Cyan Beach. Well, guess what ingredient Totodile finds? Bean sausage. So you might not even have to run your Charmander all the time if you find a Totodile that has ingredient finding up, which everyone will tell you, don't use, it sucks. But in the early game, I'd much rather use an ingredient finding Totodile and then reinvest later when I find a good one than spend all of my waking hours in the early game trying to find the perfect Totodile and then never actually progressing in the game. Because good Pokemon are like super hard to find in this game. Anyway, obviously you can't really rely on skill Pokemon and berry Pokemon to be bringing you ingredients consistently, but they might allow you to make that other meal periodically that's a little stronger than the ones that I'm having you grind in this guide. And you shouldn't choose those Pokemon again because of their ingredient spread. Ideally, it just becomes serendipitous and it kind of works out. Only choose ingredient Pokemon based on their ingredient list. And the subskills in nature and all that stuff, right? Now here's where we take off the training wheels a bit, and the rest of the guide from that point is take what the game gives you and just always go and make the best meal that you can. But don't worry about trying to grind up a mid-tier meal. You'll have a low-tier meal that you can fall back to that's going to be pretty decent. And by low, I mean everything we've talked about so far. The mid-tier meals are all the ones that we haven't highlighted in a cool color and that are not the ones at the bottom of the list that require tons of ingredients and basically a full pot expansion. Obviously, if you are able to make one of those meals consistently, then yeah, grind that one up and use it. But don't feel like you have to try to grind up every meal because they have a shelf life. So that said, look ahead at the meals, figure out which ones you want to target, figure out what Pokemon you want to hunt to make those meals, and don't worry about targeting every ingredient until you're looking at those late game dishes. Because at that point, you will need some kind of farmer for everything in order to make any of them consistently. Or you can just rely on Vaporeon. Okay, I'm putting a chart on the screen that shows the number of times I've made every meal across all of these dish types. Now, don't compare the numbers across the different dish types because as you can see, I've gotten curries disproportionately more than I've gotten desserts in the over a year that I've been playing this game. And the dessert numbers are honestly, if you start analyzing them, going to look really funky because I've just gotten it so inconsistently that I was just moving in the game faster than I could level up anything anyway. But let me draw your attention to some numbers. Hey, would you look at that? I'm just giving you the advice that got me into cooking in this game. You're going to see that a lot of the dishes on this list I've made less than 10 times. But now that I'm in the late game of cooking, I am solely focused on the late game. If there are questions about cooking you were hoping that I would answer that I didn't, let me know in the comments. Happy to make a follow-up guide here. Alright, now let's look at the week that I just went through in the game. We're at Cyan Beach, specifically to keep grinding dish levels. And to my disappointment, we got curries and stews again, which now I know I get disproportionately. And I sat on the meal screen a long time thinking about if I should use an EZZ travel ticket just to re-roll and try to get a different dish type. But I ended up deciding, nope, I'm going to keep working on the Dream Eater Butter Curry and the Hidden Power Perk Up Stew. And that actually resulted in me having less strength than last week almost. Although I did still hit Master 19, and I guess I hit it earlier. I just couldn't fully employ my Vaporeon strategy of letting it dictate which of the meals I'm making by just giving me the rando ingredients. Anyway, let's look at some Pokemon. But does this croc have a nature? It's quite docile, really. Crikey, Crocno. But this is the best Totodile I've come across. The next night, got a Psyduck and a Wooper, and I only caught the Wooper because it was hungry. Now the Psyduck, I'll save you the trouble. It's got nothing good. You're gonna see nothing good coming. Okay, you're gonna see skill trigger at level 100, and you're gonna see an awful main skill chance down nature. As we know, for the longtime viewers, we have a very high standard for what we're looking for in a Psyduck. Now let's see if this Wooper's any good. We are hoping for an ABB Wooper. I'd like to get a different potato solution short term than what I've got. And this Wooper is okay. It's got an ingredient finding subskill, but ultimately bad nature. Sorry Wooper, I knew you sucked. The next night, a hungry Golduck came our way. It likes Applebee's, and we're gonna like this one. Skill, triggers. Oh my gosh. Helping speed. Oh my gosh, 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 oh my gosh. It's quiet. Too quiet. But maybe it's great. I mean, we'll go compare it. It's great, but it's not greater than Cheyenne. Which gives us 9 out of the 11 sleep styles for Ditto. And we had a Hungry Crocolore to one-shot. I'd like to see an ABB if we're going to use it, and it doesn't have that. So the rest of this doesn't really matter that much unless it's super good, which It's not. Ah, great nature though. And the next night we one-shotted a Mr. Mime, who also doesn't have an ingredient list that interests me in the least. And while helping speed is good, everything else is pointless. Come on, Mr. Mime, couldn't you have mimicked some other ingredient specialist in my box? The next night, because there was literally nothing else to catch, I willingly caught a Wooper. And it proved to me once again that Wooper is just pointless in its existence. An ABC ingredient list, not what I want. And while it's pretty fast, it's going to quickly not be on my team. Which brings me to the morning I'm recording this, Monday. There were 3 Psyduck on the field and 1 was hungry, so I caught 2 of them. The first Psyduck is a Psyduck. And does it have anything good? Nope. Nothing good. Oh, Skill Trigger M is good. But, oh, skill, okay. At least you're interesting, but if we do our simple rating system, this is a 2 out of 4, and Cheyenne is a 3 out of 4, so it's not going to beat her. And does the next Psyduck, oh, Berry Finding, yes. Does it beat Cheyenne? Helping Speed, great. Ingredient Finder, meh. Okay, well, that's a waste of some great natures, but that's Pokemon Sleep for you. Alright, let's do our deep cuts. That was unfiltered, by the way. I don't know if this is a good strategy or not, but something that I tried twice this week was to use Helping Bonus to try to force something to happen that I wanted. First, I threw Glaceon on the team with 4 different Helping Bonus Pokemon to try to get it to expand my pot. Another time, I threw 3 Helping Bonus Pokemon on with 2 Tyranitars to just try to get some soybeans. Anecdotally, I don't feel like that strategy was that worthwhile, but I was just like, in crunch time, hey, can I get these to just go a little faster for this last little bit before the mealtime expires, but that is what it is. Oh, speaking of Tyranitar, the reason I have 2 is because one was Terry, and the other one was Kikko, who I decided to go ahead and make the investment in to jump up to Tyranitar. This does not solve my soybean problem at this point. It's going to get better at level 50 when we get it there, but it puts a big dent in my soybean problem at least. So, I've got a Tyranitar that finds 60 soybeans in a day. That's pretty great. Okay, next, please leave Pikachu alone. Kikko, when you're a Tyranitar, this will not be acceptable. And Delibird, please, I expect way more from you. As we know, this past week I have been not sleeping, and by past week I mean more than a month now, but I had some serious healing woes. I had 2 healers on my team for the overnight thing that I've been doing to heal my Pokemon back up, and they were not triggering. Like, they were both getting really low. I had to put a 3rd healer on just to conduct a rehab session. Alright, and it's probably way too late for this tip, but keep in mind that you don't have to put Pokemon on your sleep team, like when you track your sleep or when you sync your Pokégo++. Point being, the Pokemon that you want to get to the experience to, you don't have to use those Pokemon all day every day just to be able to level them up in Growth Week. If you use a healer and you can go to bed with those Pokemon at or above 90%, you're probably okay, because assuming you get 100 sleep score, they're going to heal up to 5% in the box, or you could drop a recovery incense and have them heal 10%. So as long as you can keep their energy high, you can put that sleep experience onto something that's not your main team, which is what I do all the time, right? So maybe it went without saying, but I think some people think, oh, Growth Week, I have to use these bad Pokemon that I want to level up, and that's just not true. I live every week like it's Growth Week. And I've actually been putting Pokemon on my sleep team that I wanted to level up long before I was doing this No Sleep November thing. And a final note here, doesn't it seem weird that we don't have Candy Boost during Growth Week? Like, I know that they've done the Candy Boost event during the various weeks leading up to the Legendary events to help people level up their teams, but like, Growth Week, shouldn't that be the staple of Growth Week in addition to these other bonuses? I just think that's an oversight. Like, give us the Candy Boost. It's Growth Week, okay? We're trying to grow. We're trying to use those candies. So, like, thanks for giving us the candies, but we'd like to use them. Let me know how your week's going so far. What Pokemon are you trying to level up? I would love to know what your current strategy is. And please let me know if that guide was helpful or if it's a bunch of nonsense. And regardless, let's do this again sometime. Happy researching. The first disc, if you are what meals you're going to have to make, how much ingredients you're going to need. You should be good for a while, you should be good for a while. So the rest of this doesn't really matter. So like, thanks for giving us. And I've actually been sleeping with Pokemon that I wanted to level up. Whoa.